Ladies and gentlemen, for the second panel discussion of the morning, we are pleased to welcome on stage Daniel Verwaerde, CEA Chief Executive Officer, and his guest to host the CEA panel discussion, Innovation for 21st Century Nuclear Energy. Thank you for your attention.
Oui. Good morning. My name is MacLachlan, and it is my honor and my pleasure also to be your guide during this discussion of innovations in 21st century nuclear energy. That's a big subject. What is innovation? We've already heard a lot about it during the last 2 days. For a technical industry like nuclear energy, innovation in technology is an obvious starting point. But what technology and when? And what about the time scale? A century is a long time. A century ago, Europe was at war. Russia was about to undergo cataclysmic political change, and the Great Depression was unimaginable. Telephones were rare. Fields in most of the world were tilled by men and other animals, and no one had the slightest idea about the internet, let alone a global, a digital economy. Today, change is accelerating, but nuclear energy has traditionally moved at a slow pace. It can take decades to bring a new technology from concept to electricity generation, and of course many centuries to reduce the risk from nuclear waste. Part of today's nuclear reactor fleet will be in operation until the middle of this century, so we need innovation for existing reactors. Then there are the reactors of the so-called next generation. What generation is that? Generation 3, 3 plus, 3.75, generation 4, or something else? There's a lot of momentum behind small modular reactors, SMRs, which may start being available in 2025 or 2030. But does real innovation imply going beyond light water reactor technologies? What about fast reactors? The target for first deployment of those designs is 2040 or 2050. I remember when that was the target for nuclear fusion reactors, but those are pushed now to the end of this century. Can we have all of the above? Can we afford them all? Can we build them efficiently in a volume and on a schedule that makes a difference to the world's climate and to energy security? Technology is not the only area where fresh approaches may be needed to ensure that nuclear power fulfills its role in the 21st century and beyond. What about institutional issues like regulation or financing or new frameworks to protect nuclear investments? What about making sure there are people with the skills needed to design, build, operate, and decommission the nuclear facilities of the 21st century and deal with the increasing volumes of spent nuclear fuel and final waste? Those are the issues our experts will discuss this morning. Let me briefly introduce the panel to you before giving the floor to our panel host and chairman, Daniel Verwaerde of the French Alternative Energies and Atomic Energy Commission, for initial remarks. Let me first introduce the panelists. Yes, okay. Yes, on Daniel's immediate left, Bill Magwood, Director General of the OECD Nuclear Energy Agency, with a previous career in industry, government, nuclear policy, and as a commissioner of the US NRC. That covers a lot of bases, so we're glad to have him bring his perspectives to this discussion. Paul Murphy is Managing Director of Gowling's WLG, an international law firm with 18 offices in 10 countries. He's based in Washington, D.C. His experience and expertise cover law and policy, project and risk management, as well as institutional issues and financing of nuclear power programs, which is one thing he will talk about this morning. And a fourth American, so counting myself, John Kelly is Deputy Assistant Secretary for Nuclear Reactor Technologies in the U.S. Department of Energy. John's career has been in nuclear R&D, notably risk assessment. We look to him to tell us why and how the United States is looking to innovate to advance sustainable nuclear energy. John's French counterpart is François Gauché, Director of Nuclear Energy at the CEA. His career has taken him from Germany and the US to France in areas as diverse as terrains, cyclotrons, and fusion reactors. François joined the CEA in 2010 to run the Generation 4 reactor project and was named head of the Nuclear Energy Division early this year. He will share France's experience in developing an innovative Gen 4 reactor. Charles Potter comes to us from the UK, you know, that island northwest of Europe, and specifically from the National Nuclear Laboratory, the country's premier nuclear R&D establishment. His job is to support nuclear power plant lifetime extension and new build with science and technology. Charles came to NNL in 2007 from British Nuclear Fuels Limited. He's here to tell us how the UK is innovative in nuclear skills building or rebuilding. And finally, Jean-Marie Bourgeois-Demersay is our Chinese connection. He is Dean of the Sino-French Institute of Nuclear Engineering and Technology of Yat-sen University. He's based in Zhuhai, a city, in case you don't know it, which I didn't really, it's a city a city in Guangdong that is known as the Chinese Riviera, next to Macau, and also to the Taishan EPR construction site. Based on broad international experience, including as vice president of the Grenoble Institute of Technology, Jean-Marie has led development of a unique institution in China, and maybe the world, which he will tell us about today. Finally, I have the honor to present the chairman of our session, Daniel Verwaerde, who is also chairman and CEO of the CEA. For those who are not familiar with the CEA, let me say that it is not just an R&D body, but the key establishment in France's nuclear energy and defense programs and the instrument of French nuclear policy. Daniel has been with the CEA since 1978, focusing initially on computer modeling and simulation, and most recently, directing the Military Applications Division, where he oversaw programs as diverse as weapons simulation, nuclear propulsion, and non-proliferation. Mr. Chairman, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Anne. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today, at least in France, nuclear energy is questioned for at least 3 reasons. The first reason is certainly a strong societal request for safety and, of course, material nuclear security. The second is obviously the economic competitiveness of nuclear versus other kinds of energy. Additionally, the impressive capital expenditure required for nuclear investment, and of course I am not only necessarily thinking about Hinkley Point, so this impressive capital expenditure is currently becoming a true limitation in decision on future reactor builds. The first reason is nuclear waste and, in the first place, plutonium, separated plutonium or unseparated plutonium. In France, there is a strong human requirement not to leave our children this dangerous and proliferant gift, especially since it can also be considered as a fuel and so contribute to save natural human resources. My belief is that to face these challenges, the main answer is innovation. Technological innovation, of course, but also innovation in skill teaching and more generally in human resource management. But it is also very necessary that those in charge of financial and safety aspects are innovative. Last but not least, the industrial organization, especially manufacturing, has also to be innovative. There is probably a need to create a new and more efficient way to produce nuclear plants, and of course the design of which should be drastically revisited to make it possible. Our panel is addressing this challenging from the viewpoint of innovation. Paul Murphy is addressing innovation in finance, while Bill Magwood will address regulation. Regarding technological innovation, John Kelly will report about the United States' new vision for a new nuclear revival, while François Gauché will describe the status of innovation on Generation 4 nuclear technology. Finally, Charles Potter and Jean-Marie Bourgeois-Demersay will report on innovative initiatives in knowledge diffusion and human resource management. So I suggest now that we listen to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have set us an ambitious agenda. So let's begin. And let's, as you invited us, let's start with some framework issues for nuclear energy in the 21st century. I want to start with you, Bill Magwood. it sometimes seems that nuclear energy is under attack from all sides. What do you see as the crucial area or areas where innovation is needed to allow nuclear power to play its role in the 21st century?
Merci beaucoup. Well, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here to share this panel with so many friends and colleagues, and I appreciate the opening comments that Daniel made. I agree with the high-level comments that you made, and I think that you set a very good tone for the discussion. Yes, it works. It's not working. Hold it like what? Okay, does that work? Okay. So maybe talk this like that.
Probably better. You have to sing.
You have to really scream. Okay, good. It's working. What are we talking about? No. Well, good morning. I think Anne's question is a very good one. And as I thought about the answer to that, it occurs to me that the focus of innovation for nuclear in the near term isn't necessarily about technology. Now, at the NEA, we've launched a process called Nuclear Innovation 2050, and we're working with our member countries to develop a roadmap for the R&D of the future, asking the question, what are the high priority items that nuclear needs to address through research and development between now and the next several decades? And so we're going through a process now looking at the technology aspects of the innovation that we need to consider. But as I look at the overall framework, I see a picture for nuclear energy in which technology is not the problem. I see issues of institution, a policy, a politics. Those are the barriers that I think that nuclear faces today. For example, the ability to build and operate plants depends on access to stable markets. And in many parts of the world, we do not have stable markets today. We have markets where electricity prices are routinely negative. And you can't operate and you can't survive in the operation of nuclear facilities when that is becoming more common in the rule as opposed to the exception. So that's something I think that when you think about this issue, you have to keep that in mind. If we're going to see more nuclear plants built, and our friends at the International Energy Agency have indicated that we would need to see nuclear plant construction increase dramatically to meet the global climate goals, something like 2.3% increase between now and 2050 in order to support the 2°C scenario. To see that kind of nuclear construction take place, particularly in Western countries, we're going to have to become much better at building nuclear power plants. And one area of innovation I think that would help with that would be to find a way to harmonize codes and standards. The ability to build nuclear plants using a more common group of codes and standards as opposed to the many different standards that are used across the world, which today, instead of consolidating, seem to be more proliferating. And that's something we have to give a lot of consideration to. Because for nuclear plant construction to become effective, it's important that you build, that the vendors have the ability to build as many plants as they can. Because as you build more and more plants, you become more and more proficient. And when you look at the programs in places, for particularly like Korea and Russia, where they have built nuclear plants consistently over the course of time, they are now quite good at building these plants. They can build to cost and schedule very effectively. Whereas in a lot of Western countries where their plants have not been built consistently, you see project issues, you see cost overruns, and you have to find ways to get the project managers and the subcontractors with the experience to build projects, and that's very difficult in a lot of countries. So harmonizing codes and standards is one thing I think we can look forward to. In the same vein, Anne mentioned small modular reactors, and this is something that I believe in this conference has had a great deal of attention, and it certainly has a great deal of attention in many of our member countries. And small modular reactors, I think, present a very exciting potential model for deploying nuclear reactors globally. But to optimize the economics of producing small modular reactors, it would be best if we could build them in relatively large numbers. I think it would be very important to be able to do that. And if you're going to do that, you have to think about building them in multiple countries. And today, in most countries, it will cost something like 400 or 500 million euros to get the license to operate a reactor in a given country. If you have to do that in every country, that's a huge expenditure that could be a barrier to expanding the use of these technologies. So I think one thing that we can do is, all right, she wants me to speed up, but don't forget I spent 2 minutes trying to get the microphone to work. One thing that's worth highlighting is that I think that we have a process called MDEP, where countries work together to try to find ways to cooperate in licensing current reactor technologies like the AP1000, the EPR, and technologies like that. We could go a step further and look for ways for regulators to work in concert to try to reduce the cost and complexity for vendors, particularly with small modular reactors, as these technologies go forward. Finally, and I'll just do this one quickly, because I think my friends in the panel are going to cover this in more detail. If you look further out, I do think technology can make a big difference. And one area of technology I think is worthy of great focus is the ability to use advanced technology to treat, recycle, and reduce the toxicity of nuclear waste. I think that we have the ability to take nuclear waste, which would need isolation for hundreds of thousands of years, and to convert it to waste forms that perhaps only need to be isolated for hundreds or perhaps around 1,000 years. It's a huge, huge difference. And the technologies are really at our forefront if only we would push forward and go forward with the innovation and make the investments necessary to develop the advanced fast reactors and the advanced recycling technologies necessary to make that happen. So those are the areas that I would highlight for innovation.
Hello? Yes? Yes. Okay, I'm not going to take 2 minutes to make the microphone to work, so thank you, Bill. I'm tempted, as you talk about harmonization of regulation, to remember a former chairman of the NRC who said that the NRC already had a framework for Gen 4 regulation, and so everybody else in the world could just adopt that one. Maybe it won't happen that way. I now turn to Paul. Paul, our chairman pointed to the huge capital requirements up front as an increasing obstacle to nuclear new build. Why are nuclear power plants so difficult to finance, and what can be done to possibly to mitigate that?
Thanks, Anne. Okay, we're good? Thank you to our host. It's an honor to be here. You know, at the end of the day, you don't have a project if you can't finance it. And so we can invest all the time and political energy to talk about the benefits of nuclear power and why nuclear needs to be part of the portfolio. But if we can't finance it, there is no project. And we always have to remember that. And there are lots of big projects out there. You look at the massive LNG projects in places like Australia, we're talking about tens of billions of dollars. So just being big isn't necessarily the problem. Yes, there's a huge financing requirement, but we see that in other sectors they're able to overcome that. So what makes nuclear different? And that, you know, some people try to say, oh, nuclear isn't different, and that's a mistake. Nuclear is different. And you start, you know, Director General Magwood talked about regulatory issues. When you look at its peer group, other forms of power generation, you have nothing like a nuclear regulatory authority to deal with. And on the one hand, it's a source of strength for the industry because we put safety foremost in our thinking, and that always has to be first in our thinking. But at the same time, in protecting that goal, we create a lot of uncertainty and a lot of cost because of how you have to go through the process and how the regulator can affect the process. So when you layer that into some of the things where our industry has struggled with being on time and on budget, and even in saying, you know, it's going to cost this today, and then 3 years later we say, no, well, actually our estimate went up. You know, that's not helpful, right? Because a customer or a financier wants certainty. They want to look to certainty of what it's going to cost. They want to look to certainty of the markets. And Director General Magwood talked about we have uncertainty in markets today, and we can look at the U.S. as an example. Where how did we build well over 100 nuclear power plants? And why do we have now 100 in operation? They're all in regulated markets, or they were built in regulated markets. And now we see that we're shutting down perfectly good nuclear power plants because the markets are deregulated and conditions don't favor nuclear operation. We used to like to say, well, the challenge is on the front end. It's all about the development and getting the thing built. And once you have an operating asset, you go into commercial operation, you get through your first outage, your first fuel reload. This is a great investment. And all these people are out there who want to then invest in your project. Well, guess what? We're changing that dynamic now because we've created all this uncertainty in the markets. And so we're now having to deal with a front-end problem, but now the operating period has become a great source of uncertainty as we've deregulated markets. And so if you're looking for investors or lenders to lend to a nuclear project, you have all of this uncertainty we know about on the front end. It's a known unknown, if you will. But then now we've created all these problems on the back end because in our infinite wisdom, we said deregulation is a good thing. And personally, I like limited government and free markets, but I really do wonder when we look at the core importance of electricity and energy development to society, that do we leave that to the market to decide? Because the market may not always get us to the result we want. And then if we start to give preference to certain types of generation, and then we say, well, why can't you compete if you're not getting the same preferences? Well, we've sort of outsmarted ourselves a bit. And so what does innovation mean in this context? Well, when we look at new technologies, we see that with SMRs, if we can build these in the factory, if we can reduce the cost, if we can reduce the construction cycle, if we can create new applications for the technology in remote generation where you wouldn't put a 1,400 megawatt reactor or combine it with desalination, we're creating market opportunities. And this then becomes attractive to investors and to lenders. And we say these are all good things. Technological innovation is helpful. But then we say, uh-oh, but do I have one today that I can buy? Is there that reference plant? And until we build them and start operating them, there's that first-of-a-kind risk. Even if as engineers you can say, oh, well, it's not that different. Remember, you're dealing with bankers and investors. They don't think like engineers, right? They're worried about when their golf tee time is. You know, they have much more important things to worry about. And so you have to then put it in the ways that they can understand. And so when we talk about financing, are there lots of financing techniques out there? Sure. We have export credit agency financing. We have government-to-government type deals that some of the people in attending this conference are using very successfully. We have loan guarantees. We have contract for difference structures. We have all these things that we can put in place. But what it means is that you have to make a decision at a policy level underneath it all to say that nuclear has to be part of the answer. So you start with a premise that we need to continue to electrify the world for human development. We need that electrification to be clean generation. Where we have electrification, we need to take out coal and replace it with clean generation. And we need to be convinced and convince the population that nuclear has to be part of that answer. Once you do that, then you can start putting policies in place, because the criticism we have that limits what we can do on the financing side is you get the criticism, well, why should we help this industry? And you look at the country that we're sitting in right now, who made a decision in the 70s to heavily invest in nuclear. Who bore the ultimate risk of that development? The taxpayers. But at the same time, now they've enjoyed for years the cheapest prices for electricity in Western Europe. So you sit there and say, there are these intangible goals. When we think about finance and we think about innovation, it's innovative thinking in the sense that if I like climate change, if I'm worried about energy security, energy diversity, stability, those don't model at the project level. There's no number you plug into a financial model to justify the investment. But at a macro level, at a national planning level, these are hugely important where the government has to step in and push these goals forward. I'll stop there.
Yeah, it seems that there was an opportunity perhaps lost at the COP21 meeting, which was held here a few months ago, to actually get a consensus in that area that nuclear should be part of the solution for the next century. But anyway, maybe there is a way to get around that. You talked about technological innovation, Paul, which gives me a good transition to your neighbor on the left, John Kelly. Well, the U.S. has innovated in nuclear generation since the beginning, in fact. But U.S. nuclear power growth is slower than we thought it would be, even 10 years ago. And reactors are being closed, it seems almost daily, even if their licenses are still valid. So Paul went into some of the problems behind that, as did Bill. Cheap natural gas, renewables being subsidized. What kind of innovation can save nuclear power in the U.S., and what is the government doing to make it happen?
Well, thank you, Anne and Daniel, for inviting me to this panel, and good morning, everyone. Let me give you a perspective from the U.S. on where we see nuclear power and the need for it in the future. So if you go back since the beginning of his administration, President Obama has been leading the charge for the development of clean power, including nuclear power. And then we have the COP21 agreement, and if you look at the practical implications of that for the U.S., what it means is that to get an 80% reduction in emissions, we basically have to completely decarbonize the electricity production in the U.S. by 2050. And then taking that a step further, what does that mean for nuclear? So we've looked at various scenarios, and even with tenfold increases in renewables, transitioning all the fossil to sequestration, we're still have a big gap. And that gap implies that we would need to about double the amount of nuclear power in the U.S., going from about 100 gigawatts to 200 gigawatts by 2050. Now, in order to get to that level, I think nuclear power must be publicly acceptable and economically competitive with other clean power technologies. So public acceptance implies that it must be safe, environmentally sound, and reliable. Now, I think nuclear power can meet these criteria, but it comes through good public communications and continued safe and reliable operations. Those things working hand in hand allow the public to feel comfortable about the technology. However, if we look at the economic competitiveness and we look at the alternative clean power sources, we see that they are rapidly decreasing their costs. Solar prices have come down, wind have come down. So the trend is that the other alternatives to nuclear power are decreasing their cost, while the costs of nuclear power have remained relatively stagnant and flat. So our view is that we need to use innovation to really make nuclear competitive in the future. But before I talk about what we see is needed in the future, let me just reflect on a couple things from the past. So innovation played an important role in the U.S. in addressing the lessons from the 3 Mile Island accident. You know, the accident highlighted the need for simplified designs, more passive safety features, and this led then to a major program of innovation that eventually led to what we now call the Generation 3 reactors. This included both PWR and BWR technology. It was the ABWR, the AP1000, ESBWR, and System 80 Plus, I think, was included in that mix as well. That effort started in the 90s has now led to the culmination of AP1000 new builds, both here in the U.S., and in China, not here yet. Okay. But I think we saw, by making those investments in that new technology, we now have a technology that solves the problems of the lessons learned and looks like it's a simplified design and can be economically competitive. But I think still there's the issue of large capital cost, and so many in the US in the late 90s recognized that more innovation was needed in LWR technology if it was to continue to be viable going into the future. So in the year 2000, DOE funded a small project at the Oregon State University and the Idaho National Laboratory to design a small modular reactor. An innovative design emerged from that project that eliminated large pipe breaks as an accident sequence of concern, and they also found the need to eliminate the need for pumps to cool the core. By relying on established physics such as gravity, this design could withstand a complete loss of power and still cool the core. Today, that small project has emerged as the NuScale reactor design, and they intend to submit their license application this year and deploy their technology before 2025. So again, we see that innovation has led from an idea to conception to licensing to reality. But in our view, even more innovation is going to be important in the future for nuclear power to be competitive with natural gas, even with carbon capture and sequestration technology. And furthermore, innovation must occur rapidly, because that's exactly what the alternatives to nuclear power are doing today. New technologies need to be brought to market much more quickly than traditional nuclear power has taken. Right now, we're looking at 25-year timelines. Those need to be shortened if we're going to be able to compete in the market as the market evolves rapidly.
The American initiatives really quickly.
Okay. So let me just talk about what the barriers are. Low natural gas or cost is certainly a barrier to nuclear power today, as are the large capital costs and the regulatory process. I think the regulatory process can be worked, but it's just going to take some time. In our view, the Generation 4 reactors, with their higher temperatures and improved safety, and in many cases lower operating pressures, offer the possibility of tackling the capital cost issue. And if we can reduce the capital cost per kilowatt hour, we believe we can compete with natural gas with sequestration. There's also non-electric applications for these advanced Gen 4 reactors, and so we feel confident that the investments we make today will pay off mid-century and beyond. If in an earlier talk I talked about the GAIN initiative, which is a new initiative in DOE to help accelerate innovation in nuclear. Be glad to talk to others about that more lately. But innovation will come not only in reactor design, but through the component and subcomponent level as well. We have an accident-tolerant fuel program looking at developing fuel that has higher performance, is safer, and is reduced cost. We're looking at advanced manufacturing as a way of reducing the cost of manufacturing specialty parts using 3D printing, hot isostatic pressing, and other technologies. So we think there's plenty of opportunities to bring in innovation in other fields into the nuclear area. So while the barriers of today are not that dissimilar from those of the past, the quest for clean power compels us to find ways to be innovative. The nuclear industry has a track record of innovation, and we expect them to respond to the challenges we face today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. One thing I find fascinating is the idea that 3D printing that could be used in the nuclear field, and you might actually design and print out a reactor, but maybe not tomorrow. Well, who knows? We're talking about 21st century. Huh? Okay, François, France has long been a champion of sodium-cooled fast reactors, which are, I would say, a mainstay of what we know as Generation 4 technology. But I think the general public doesn't, or at least journalists, doesn't always know that all fast reactors are not Gen 4. There's a bit of confusion about what is Gen 4. Anyway, the CEA is going much past old designs to develop the industrial prototype, which you call Astrid. Why is it so important to innovate in this domain, and what is France doing?
Thank you, Anne. Does it work? Yes. Good morning. I think Generation 4 reactors or systems, including the fuel cycle, are expected to be very safe, They are expected also to be competitive. They need also to be sustainable and proliferation resistant. And the combination of these 4 criteria is very important if you want to qualify for 4th-generation reactor. Several technologies are investigated, and maybe you know that the R&D is shared at international level inside the Generation 4 International Forum. Several technologies are investigated, like the sodium, lead, or gas-cooled fast neutron reactors, the very high-temperature reactor, molten salt reactor, and supercritical water reactor. Inside the Generation 4 International Forum, we try to... Oh, la date? Okay. We also try to harmonize and come up with safety design guidelines and safety design criteria that are shared among all the members of the Generation 4 International Forum, and we have started also a process by which we try to share these criteria with national regulatory authorities and international bodies that gather these national safety authorities. So in France, we started in 2010 the R&D and design studies for ASTRID. This stands for Advanced Sodium Technological Reactor for Industrial Demonstration, and I think the title of ASTRID describes exactly what we want to achieve. The goal is to combine the most demanding safety criteria that we can imagine with the fast neutron spectrum advantages. These advantages are the capability to recycle plutonium and to stabilize the plutonium inventory. This helps to decrease drastically the volume and the radiotoxicity of the waste. And they can also use the uranium resource in a much better way. Even they can use depleted uranium and do not need natural uranium anymore. To achieve high standards in safety and operability, we need to rely at the same time on proven and reliable technologies that were tested in the past, and to integrate the feedback of experience of what was done previously, but also by introducing necessary technological innovations. In order to do that and to be successful, we choose at CEA to gather competencies of industrial and R&D partners from the beginning of the project, not to do it alone, not to make the design and the R&D of ASTRID alone, but to share the work with industrial partners and academical partners that would like to join us. And we started in 2010 with that. And this, we implemented not a commercial scheme, but a collaboration scheme with our partners, so that it gives very good flexibility. In an innovative project, you need flexibility. And this allows also our industrial partners to, let's say, not be shy with regard to innovation, but to come up with ideas and share them with us in a collaborative scheme instead of a commercial scheme where you have a very precise technical specification and you cannot go beyond that. Let me give you a few examples of ASTRID innovations. We have a very innovative core design that was patented in 2010, so that even in the case of an accident, we do not have an increase of power in the reactor. We are developing electromagnetic pumps with no rotating parts, and we develop them in collaboration with Toshiba. Velan is also involved in the design of some valves for liquid sodium, in order to eradicate the possibility of sodium-water reaction that could happen in heat exchangers. We are working on a power conversion system with no water, and we replace the water by nitrogen, and instead of a Rankine cycle, we go to a Brayton cycle at the turbine. Alstom and Rolls-Royce are involved in this development. Another strength of the project is to involve, since the beginning, industrial companies that have also a strong experience in large project management and in building of nuclear facilities. For example, we have Bouygues, involved in a global civil engineering, Jacobs for the balance of plant. Also, SEIV brings its expertise for the hot cells. Airbus is performing studies with regard to the reliability of the plant. And the support of this industry is important for us and gives a lot of credibility to the global management of the project. I would like to add that the most ambitious partnership is with Japan. We started in 2014. Japan is active on a lot of tasks for R&D, but also Mitsubishi Heavy Industries is performing design studies on important systems like shutdown system or seismic isolation system or core catcher design. And we are now discussing with our Japanese partners to deepen this collaboration. As you can see, Astrid is a balance between R&D and engineering activities, between experience, feedback, and innovation, between public bodies and private industry. I think these are the right ingredients for a successful fourth-generation reactor project.
Okay, thank you, François. We're going to change gears here radically and go to the area, a kind of soft area, not technology. But I want to ask Charles Potter about how the National Nuclear Laboratory and the UK in general is using innovation to get back a workforce that is competent in today's technologies and tomorrow's technologies.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Danielle, for allowing me to be part of this panel. And also thanks to the organisers for this great event. The UK has set out plans to deliver 16 gigawatts of low-carbon electricity through the new nuclear build programmes to replace its ageing AGR fleet, which will reach their end of life by 2030. The Nuclear Energy Skills Alliance has been looking at the skills requirements over several years, and they're covering both the civil and the defence requirements in the UK. A nuclear workforce assessment was published in 2015, and that predicted a growth in the current workforce from 78,000 to about 110,000 in 2021. Now, the workforce can be split into three tiers. There are general skilled workers, those that can move around not just the nuclear sector, but other sectors. There are nuclear skilled workers who have about 10 years' experience, primarily focused with their capability and knowledge in the nuclear sector. And we also have subject matter experts who are 20 years plus in the industry with knowledge and experience technically and often fundamentally essential to the future growth of nuclear industry. Now, the nuclear sector will need to compete for Tier 1 general skilled workers. It won't require as many of the Tier 2 or Tier 3 workers, but what we have to remember is it takes 5 to 20 years to train these individuals. So it's essential to create a pipeline to foster those skills associated and have associated processes to accurately predict the shortfalls in the required workforce. So we know there are going to be peaks in terms of civil construction, in terms of manufacturing. What are we doing about it? What innovative ways are we dealing with this matter, looking at the national skills landscape and building on the government's current papers on nuclear skills and a new national strategy, which we need to meet 90% of our sector skills by development of the right profile to meet future demands. We need to ensure that our expertise and knowledge in the nuclear workforce is unsurpassed globally by developing high-quality training and development and certification programs. And we also need a more diverse nuclear workforce, which includes increasing the proportion of women in the sector from 25% to 40% by 2030. Now, the nuclear skills model has been endorsed by industry and government, and it complements the government review from the Nuclear Industry Council and its skills work stream. The Nuclear Skills Strategy Group has been created as the industry's skills lead and one voice to government. This is actually chaired by NNL's Fiona Raymond. The NSSG is supported by Programme Delivery Board, which is accountable for delivery of a single nuclear skills plan for the United Kingdom. Now, the skills life cycle sets out a holistic approach to sustaining our nuclear skills and consists of 5 areas. The first is to attract more people into our industrial sector to increase the diversity of the workforce. And it's achieved through going into schools and looking at science, technology, engineering and maths, raising opportunities within the sector by ensuring individuals have that right education base to work in the sector through university technical colleges, linking universities and industry together. The government also has a 3-year Your Life campaign, again aimed at promoting science and math skills to enable success within the STEM careers. We need to recruit and retain our staff. We need to look at the apprenticeships, graduates, and also industry movers. Through promotion of Trailblazer programme to design new apprenticeship standards to meet sector needs, we also need nuclear industry partnerships, actually enabling the work experience on the ground. Several programmes exist with academic institutes such as academic partnerships, nuclear doctoral training, nuclear graduate and sponsorship programmes. And through our National Skills Academy Nuclear Competence Framework, there's a development of cross-sector nuclear career paths designed to offer a more diverse career within the sector. But clearly there will be pinch points. We will be in competition for those Tier 1 areas. So what can we do? An example is at Bridgewater College in Somerset, where they've looked at a skills shortage of steel fixing, and they've actually set up a new apprenticeship scheme to meet the gap and demand in that particular area for Hinkley Point C. But we also need to look at our initiatives for professional development, and that includes secondments and academic access through the National Nuclear User Facility, and also linking to our international capabilities and facilities to enable technical excellence development between academia and industry. IFCEN have also developed nuclear awareness training alongside their nuclear skills passport. And this integrated competency framework enables the mobility of the sector workforce between nuclear sites. The National College for Nuclear, in partnership with EDF Energy and Sellafield, have 2 centres, but one based in Somerset and the other in Cumbria, to address gaps, for example, in training for those workers with A-levels, but not a degree.
Sorry, Charles, could you come to your conclusion?
2 seconds away. And lastly, knowledge management. Several activities are available, including online learning portal. And again, we need to use innovation to ensure that knowledge management frameworks are in place. So, in conclusion, the nuclear sector skills base is arguably the most valuable asset with significant investment to retain the skills pipeline and to develop sufficient workers needed for the future. A new national skills operating model will align government, industry, training providers and skills bodies. The industry needs to be confident to rise to the skills shortage challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles. It's kind of a chicken and egg situation. You need the people to operate the plants, or you can't have the plants. So we hope that those plants will be there in time to use the people. Now, we've been talking about old nuclear countries, or we represent old nuclear countries here, but today nuclear power's future is being written in China. Demand for nuclear engineers is brisk in a country that is adding 8 or more nuclear units a year while working on many kinds of reactor technology. So, Jean-Marie, what challenges have you faced in integrating French nuclear engineering education into a completely foreign environment?
Thank you, Anne. First, Anne and Daniel, it's an honor to be a member of this panel. Ladies and gentlemen, though I'm French, I work for a Chinese institution. And I would like just to conduct a brief survey. In this room, are there any Chinese people? Oh, my dear friend, good. So many Chinese in the world and one in this room. Thank you very much. Yeah. So there may be a couple of reasons why we have so few Chinese in this room. The first one might be a language issue. I, as a Frenchman, I don't feel comfortable being a member of a panel conducted in English, and it might be the same with Chinese people. And there's a second reason, which is more cultural. At 12, it's lunchtime, and in China, people eat at 12. Yeah. So thank you, in any case, for attending this panel. Now, when I discuss about IFCEN, which is the organization I belong to, I often hear the question, why IFCEN? Why does it make sense to build a Sino-foreign institute in nuclear engineering and technology? Why? Can't the Chinese do it by themselves? Yeah. So there are many reasons why. I will just like to focus on a few of them. First, in our official denomination, Sino-French Institute of Nuclear Engineering and Technology, the word nuclear is at the very center of this denomination. I live, as Anne mentioned, in Zhuhai, which is next to Macau, and it's some sort of Chinese Riviera. It means that every day I can breathe fresh air. Now, China is a country where nuclear energy might not be the solution, but it's certainly part of the solution. And in any case, it is not perceived by the population as being a problem. The problem every day in many cities now is, am I going to suffocate where I live? So the very word nuclear in our denomination is extremely important for China. There is also another issue why IFCEN was created. It is engineering and technology. Of course, China is a fantastic country with so many universities and institutions and higher education institutions. However, China is quite interested in what foreign countries can offer as far as education is concerned. China has now so many means to support foreign collaboration. And they know that in France we have a long tradition of engineering and technology training, which has been quite successful from maybe 200 years from now and still going on, with very well-known schools of engineering such as École Polytechnique and so on. And the Chinese are very well informed about what each country makes best. And today they are interested to differentiate their higher education offer through collaboration with foreign countries. So this is probably one of the things that France can offer. It is some sort of educational pattern to better train engineers, including in the nuclear field. You know that 2 EPRs are being built right now in Taishan. So, of course, CGN, which is our industrial partner, is right now building those EPRs together with EDF and Areva. And those 2 EPRs will be operated in the 50 years to come. And it makes sense to properly train Chinese engineers who are going to work in such power plants. So the last reason why we created IFCEN is that, as it is mentioned, it is Sino-French. So why should we develop some international collaboration between 2 countries as far as training is concerned? Can't the Chinese do it by themselves? Of course they can. Now, the real question is, first, nuclear safety is a world asset. We should feel, all of us, concerned with nuclear safety. So it means that, as it is a world asset, international collaboration regarding this topic makes full sense. It makes sense. The second reason why is also that international collaboration when training engineers makes more and more sense. Why? Because I think we are moving from a national pattern of higher education towards globalization, and globalization in higher education also goes through international collaboration. So this is why IFCEN was created. Maybe I can say a few words about what it is?
1 minute.
1 minute. Okay. So IFCEN was created in 2010. It is actually a department belonging to Sun Yat-sen University. It's a full Chinese department of Sun Yat-sen University, though the French participate to its development. So it was created in 2010. It's a 6-year program. We enroll as many as 110 students each year. These are the initial headcounts, and after a couple of years, some of them actually quit and joined other departments. And we have a 6-year program, as I mentioned, a 4-year bachelor program, which ends with a bachelor degree in nuclear engineering, plus a 2-year master program, so total 6 years. We implement this program in 3 languages. In Chinese, of course, because we are fully part of a Chinese university. But most of the math, physics, and chemistry courses are taught in French. And English is also used for many purposes, including writing theses and so on. Now, what is interesting is that when we enroll the students, they just happen to pass the Gaokao, and they don't know a single word of French when they join our department. They know nothing in French, and they only have 5 months to catch up, to learn French, and to be in a position to follow their studies in math, physics, and chemistry in French just after 5 months of proper training. So I think this is quite an achievement, and they manage. Yeah.
It's fascinating, I think. I wonder whether this approach, because we all know that Chinese are very sharp, yeah? They learn fast. I wonder whether this approach could be used in other countries which have maybe a not such a long tradition of nuclear energy, even engineering, emerging countries where perhaps, and does it have to be where French reactors are being sold?
Thank you, Anne, for this question. Actually, what we created in China with Sun Yat-sen University does not even exist in France. In France, we have many schools of engineering, and some of them have some nuclear program within existing schools of engineering, but we don't have in France a dedicated school of engineering dedicated to nuclear engineering, starting from the very beginning, just after the baccalaureate, and up to the master level. So can this pattern be applied to other countries? It can be applied. I think it can be applied to other countries. It can be reproduced. As far as I understood from some previous conversations yesterday and 2 days ago, I think that a couple of countries could be interested. I think about South Africa, for instance, and Turkey, and Vietnam. So I believe that this pattern could be reproduced. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Charles, I'm not going to resist the temptation to mention the vote on Brexit, or the UK possibly leaving the European Union. Now, I'm sure that you have quite a lot of close connections in the research area with European countries, members of the European Union. What impact, if any, perhaps it's even a positive impact, but what could Brexit, how could Brexit impact the programs for innovation in which you are participating on the European level?
Thanks, Anne. I think we've heard quite a bit over the course of the 3 days about the impact of Brexit. We operate as an R&D facility globally, and the decision with regard to the outcome of Brexit will be made by UK government and the European Union. But we still have challenges in the nuclear industry, and as my presentation alluded to, we have a skill shortage across not only the UK but in other areas as well. So it's really important to ensure that we maintain collaboration throughout the process and ensure that we look towards our partners to ensure best value in terms of the R&D programs. At the end of the day, there's no point in having two organizations spending similar amounts of money duplicating effort. The best way is to share ideas, and that, I hope, is the way in which not only the NNL but also the UK will operate through this period of reflection following the outcome of the Brexit vote last week.
Okay, thank you. Speaking of political risk, in fact, I want to turn to Paul. You know, as I said earlier, a century is a long time, and you cannot guarantee the stability of any political regime, even if you don't go into cataclysmic political changes. You have laws, you have regulations that can be made and undone. How big is political risk or instability in political situation in newcomer countries an issue that might be scaring off investors?
Well, I think when you look at the investment recovery period and the initial development period for nuclear, if you're loaning into a project or investing in a project, you're making a long-term bet. And, you know, of course, we could talk about, you know, innovation is this theme, so we can talk about how you can refinance after you've gone into commercial operation and bring in cheaper money, lower your cost of capital over the life of the project, and all these things sound great. But at the end of the day, somebody has to believe that there is an economic rationale for the project that will be maintained over time. So if you look at debt, and you look at export credit agency debt, it's 18 to 18 and a half year repayment period after commercial operation under the OECD rules. So if you were to say, look, I have a 20-year power purchase agreement, that covers the debt. And that sounds good. But what about the equity? When you're talking about an asset that is, in theory, designed for 60 years, and we know in reality the new designs will run for 80, maybe even 100 years, you know, somebody needs to believe that it's a viable economic endeavor over that time. And what's very telling is when you look at the UK contract for difference that's been offered for Hinkley Point, it's a 35-year commitment by the UK government. What does that tell us? It tells us that we can't only be concerned about repaying the debt, we need investors to be able to take an interest in this project as a long-term asset. And if we don't set aside a place in the market for this asset that's very expensive but has a very long lifetime, we're not going to get people to invest in it. You know, you look at the long-term life of the asset, and in financial models, no one models after 30 years. So they say everything discounts to zero after 30 years. So intellectually, you can plug those numbers into a model and say, yeah, I see that. But in year 31 of a nuclear plant, that's fully paid off, that's an exceedingly valuable asset to somebody. But our financial models don't capture that. And that was a point that I was hitting on before. There's so many things about nuclear that we don't capture in nuclear models that we have to build the policy consensus, which gets all the way back to your question, is if we don't make the case for why nuclear is important, and we don't educate the public, and we don't have the government and both parties or multiple parties standing behind this as an endeavor, it becomes a fad. And fads people don't invest in when you're talking billions of dollars. So we have to condition the market whatever country we're in, whether it's a democracy or elsewhere. I mean, remember that even in China, which isn't a democracy, the last time I checked, there was a project in southern China that there was such local resistance to that it was canceled. It was a multi-billion-dollar project. So we can't be so naive to say it's just a problem for democracies. You look at what the UAE's done and elsewhere, they've invested in educating the public, and that's very important.
Thank you, Bill. As was mentioned, licensing for SMRs is moving forward in the U.S., and the NRC has agreed to consider a site permit application from TVA for some kind of SMR. And this includes limiting the emergency planning zone to the site boundary. Now, you mentioned harmonization of regulatory criteria. You mentioned codes and standards, that's on the industrial side, but on the safety side, we have seen divergence between the European approach and the American approach. Do you think that people will follow, other regulators will follow the US approach on this, assuming that the NRC is ready to go there, or will public opinion and conservatism prevent harmonization on a US model?
Well, I think at the end of the day, every regulator in every country is responsible for safety in that country, and I don't think that any of them are willing to give that up for any kind of industrial benefit. I think that the potential for having regulators work together is where they have a common understanding and common goals. So it may very well be true that in some cases, two regulators could never come to consensus on how to approach a particular technology. For example, in some countries, light water reactors are required to have vent scrubbers, filters in case of a severe accident. In other countries, those are not required. So that's an example of where there's simply a disagreement between regulators. That doesn't mean one is wrong and one is right. It just means they've taken different approaches and come up with different answers. So I don't think I would ever suggest that every regulator could come to consensus on how to approach small modular reactors or any other technology. But certainly, I think that there are some who could come to agreement. And the question is, can you find a mechanism to enable those who are interested to do so, to have a harmonization and to proceed? Doing it globally, I don't think we'll ever see that. I think it's too difficult. But certainly, I think you can have a coalition of the willing, so to speak, that would proceed and go forward.
Which might create a sufficient market for SMRs to get to those volume construction criteria, which is necessary for them actually to make a breakthrough on the market. François. Is innovation expensive? I mean, Astrid isn't necessarily cheap, and budgets, as we who live in France know, are very tight. Can the real near-term cost, I mean, these are today's francs, dollars, euros, whatever, be justified by the longer-term potential in this kind of tight budgets? Who cares about nuclear waste? Burning nuclear waste today?
Thank you, Anne, for this difficult question. Yes, in our case, in the case of when you want to reach very high standards of safety, for instance, in most of the cases, the innovation is expensive. Of course, we try to keep the cost of those innovations as low as possible. I personally believe in a learning curve. I think that we need to build, we need to operate, we need to improve by using the feedback of experience. Every time you start a new prototype, it will be expensive at the start. And of course, on paper, there are always solutions that look better, cheaper. There is a very famous quote by Admiral Rickover that I think everybody knows in this room, paper reactors versus real reactors. And paper reactors are always cheaper, easier, and so on and so on. I think it is important at some point in time to build and to look at it. But I believe really in the learning curve. When we look at Astrid, this is an expensive object. We have several design phases. At each of the design phases, we implement a cost-killing phase, where we try really to reduce all the time, because at this stage, this is too big and too expensive. So we try to kill the costs as much as possible while keeping the innovative options. I think that working with industrial partners since the beginning of the project is a very good asset to do that. They can tell us about the feedback of experience of real build for instance, civil engineering. My personal view is that there are many, many domains where we can innovate in a much bigger manner. I think civil engineering methods is one of these domains.
In fact, in the 21st century, maybe we wouldn't even have paper reactors. We would just have them on computers, because it's the paperless world. Bill, you had a comment.
Yes, I agree with François' comments on this. But one thing I think you should take a step back and think about. We benefit today from significant investments that previous generations made to establish nuclear technology, aerospace technology, many other areas where huge amounts of money were spent to develop the technologies that we use every day today and really don't give much thought to. I think the danger of our generation is that we are so fixated on keeping what we have right now, so fixated on keeping today's comforts, that we're not thinking about the future. We're not looking over the horizon and willing to make the investments to make the world of 50 years from now better than the world of today. And I think that's a failure of vision. And I think while I recognize that every government and every society is looking for ways of economize, and there's financial crises, there's economic problems, if we don't invest in the future, we won't have a very good future. And I think it's up to industrial leadership and also political leadership to make that case and to find the resources to build the steps to the future.
Okay, thanks. I want to just open a kind of Pandora's box question and ask John Kelly to respond in half a minute. And it concerns Generation 4, which we've talked about, and the potential for, let's say, making sure nuclear waste and spent fuel do not harm future generations. Our chairman mentioned that as a priority for him. But there is no general agreement on the need to close the nuclear fuel cycle, or even let's say, the urgency of closing it, or even the need to recycle plutonium. And the United States is kind of a leader in the other camp, let's say. Can that vision of a closed fuel cycle really be deployed worldwide?
Well, I think in the end, the decision on the fuel cycle is up to each country, and the circumstances in the country are different. Some of it has to do with uranium availability, and if it's not available, then there's more of a drive to recycle, because you then create your own fuel. Countries that are rich in uranium, perhaps it's not so important. I think what is important in all cases is getting more kilowatt hours out per kilogram of waste produced. And so making even light water reactors much more efficient through advanced fuels and things like this are techniques for increasing uranium utilization. So in the end, it's a question of uranium utilization. At some point in the future, uranium prices may increase, and this will then lead to changes in technology.
So it's really a question of waste reduction versus actual waste elimination or spent fuel elimination. Mr. Chairman, do you want to comment on that point?
Yes, I think I just agree with what John said. I think it's, first of all, a vision, a policy of each country, because nuclear remains a policy for every country. In Europe, and especially in France, we think that waste, not only waste reduction for the low risk waste is important, but also that the elimination or the burning of the most dangerous waste is important. This is a vision. So we will not necessarily speak about closed cycle, which is for me a very long-term vision, but we think that today, if we don't face it, if we don't address the plutonium concern, we think probably it will kill nuclear in a mid-term. So this is a French vision, and probably very linked to what the public opinion in France and in Europe is thinking.
At the same time, you say that it is a very long-term affair, but we're talking about the 21st century. So are we talking, and we're talking about political, possibly political instability. So question, do we want to leave spent fuel to our next generations, or even do we want to leave it in countries where it might not be as safe? But maybe we will not open the rest of that Pandora's box. And I want to ask now to open the discussion to the floor. So I have down here and there, please, in either order. Oh. Please give us your name and affiliation.
Ron Oberth of the Organization of Canadian Nuclear Industries. The panel has talked eloquently about innovations in global financing, global supply chain, global skills training. But one area that hasn't been addressed effectively in my mind is global solutions to the back end of the fuel cycle. And I've read, for example, that Western Australia has made a proposal, I don't know if it's supported by the government, that they could be a global repository for high-level nuclear waste. I know that faces all kinds of political and social challenges, but as we think globally about about combating greenhouse gases and doing other things globally, how will we ever get to the point where we come up with global optimal solutions to the back end of the fuel cycle?
International or regional repositories, a very hot and difficult topic. John.
Let me say just a couple things. So in the U.S., we have the Waste Isolation Pilot Project, a repository for defense waste. There was lots of opposition to that repository, but once it opened and the population got to see how it operated, then people started thinking about how can we do even more things with this. So I think that once we have operating repositories in the world, and I don't know who will be first, and that they operate safely, this will open up the world to ideas of how you could consider regional kind of solutions.
Paul.
If South Australia sells the national government on their idea, they're going to make a lot of money. The money is there already in a lot of the countries that are trying to figure out what to do with this. It makes absolutely no sense for every country to dig a big hole in the ground, especially for the ones that have 1 or 2 units. And we have to there's been this idea that, as a generator, as a country, you have to maintain, it's your responsibility to deal with the end result of what you've done. And that's fine. Don't dispute that, but that doesn't mean that, especially for countries that may not have a good site, that may not be able to afford it, that may not be able to find a site because of political resistance, that if South Australia says, well, we have a huge desert with nothing in it, and we can dig a big hole in the ground just as good as the next person, and we'll take your stuff and charge you a fee for it, and that'll benefit South Australia. There's a complete logic to that, and we need to get out of our own way and make these things happen, because it's a good answer for how we're selling nuclear to the public. The same thing with nuclear decommissioning, where when you say, yes, we can put something in safe storage, and we have this issue in the United States now when we shut down these plants and say, okay, we'll tear them down 50 years from now. That may be a good engineering solution and may be perfectly logical, but for the public who's going to stare at it for the next 50 years, that doesn't sell very well. So we need to sort of solve some of the perception problems that we've created for ourselves by innovative thinking.
There's also going to be a very large market for transporting all that spent fuel to Western Australia or Southern Australia. Daniel?
You point out what I wanted to say. I think I agree with you. I think that for future, nuclear has to be addressed as a global view. So with the necessity of some standardization, as it was mentioned, because it is true for the nuclear, for the reactor design, but it's true also for fuel, for the regulation, and especially for transportation. You know, what is difficult at the current time is generally transportation for public acceptance, but for other reasons too. So I think probably we have to work together on all the topics, and it will be probably an innovative way to be sure that you will have nuclear, not only on the 21st century, but also the 22nd.
Okay, yes, Phil.
Hello, Phil Chafee with Nuclear Intelligence Weekly. I have two questions. One for Mr. Kelly. To what extent, if any, is the U.S. and particularly the U.S. labs cooperating with China on advanced reactor R&D? And the second question is, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Tom Countryman has articulated a slightly different view of the closed fuel cycle than Mr. Kelly did. And in particular, he said he's been urging France not to sell reprocessing technology to China. And so, Mr. Verwaerde, I'm curious, A, if these U.S. proddings have delayed or modified the deal you're working on with China, an intergovernmental agreement, and also more broadly, what the status of that intergovernmental agreement is that would enable a commercial contract between Areva and CNNC.
For
reprocessing.
For reprocessing,
yeah. Thanks.
Never give the microphone to a journalist because he never has only one question. John, could you just very briefly?
You know, in general, we're looking for these bilateral opportunities where we both benefit. So with respect to China, it's principally on molten salt technology with Oak Ridge, which was the original developer of the concept. But the collaboration goes both ways. So we're interested in the technology, they are, and so we're working together principally through Oak Ridge to further the development of that technology.
And to what degree that...
Okay. So you point out a very important question. It is probably difficult to give you an answer in 30 seconds or 1 minute. What we can say is that, number one, we think that closing the cycle and especially burning plutonium is important. So there is a very question for us. Is it more important to burn plutonium and so to eliminate it, or to create some special mine for the future of plutonium? For me, it's a very question. Of course, for the health of people, because as all of us know, this is probably the most dangerous material for health, plutonium, but also for proliferations. And so we think that it's important. Coming back now to the project to sell a reprocessing plant to China. So we think that there are some care to take that we are trying to share with China between intergovernmental agreement between the countries, and of course involving IAEA if the three partners will cooperate. We think that regarding a P5 country, especially China, the most important thing we have to care is about nuclear material security. And I think that it's truly not only a concern, it's a point on which China and France and IAEA are very involved in.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to apologize because we started the session a little bit late, and that was because of me. But I don't want to, so I think we have to end it a slight bit late because I don't want to deprive Daniel Verwaerde of the opportunity to sum up what he has heard today.
Okay, thank you very much, Anne. So I just try to summarize a lot of very interesting things we have said this morning during this panel, so it's difficult to summarize. So just a few ideas. The first one is that there is no doubt nuclear is a part of the solution to have a reduction of the growing of the temperature for 21st and 22nd century. I think it's important, and I think that innovations is probably a good way to face this challenge in many areas, as it was mentioned this morning. And I'm sorry, we were not enough. The number of us was not sufficient because we should have addressed also the industrial challenge, which is probably a part of the key solution regarding innovation. So we have no time to speak about that this morning. So in finance, I think finance is probably, as it was mentioned, one of the key solutions to have a long-term nuclear. And I love the sentence which says, even the most beautiful project, if you can't finance it, you have no project. And I think that's so true. So I just agree with you. And that will be my conclusion. In technology, I think that nuclear is truly, as I mentioned, a part of the mix as energy for future. It is said every day, I would say, by the Department of Energy in the United States. And just to make a glance, I said also in France, of course, we are decreasing probably a part of our mix, but I would like to recall that at current time, the part of nuclear in the electricity production is something as 70-75%. And so the goal is to reduce to 50%. It will be higher but in many countries, especially in countries where it's generally 10-20% in most of the countries. So I think that even in France, nuclear is a part of the solution. I want to, just for the French guy, to recall. I was yesterday with Mrs. Royal, who called me that she doesn't want to oppose the different kind of energy, and of course nuclear is an important contributor, more than 50%. Just for the French guy, because sometimes they're a little bit afraid asking. The key element is also human resource management, and I think it's necessary for newcomers to teach and to help them to get, of course, skill, but also for what I call the legacy nuclear countries, which are to renew. They of course, they feel, but also they have also to improve the safety and many tips. And so it's important to have skills and to have high-level people. But I think what is interesting in the IFCEN example, it means that, of course, I don't see IFCEN as the fact that French people are creating a school in China. That's not true. That's a true partnership. And I think that example can be seen as some partnership, equilibrated partnership between many nations, so we can share the knowledge. And so this is, it has to be seen as that, the IFCEN, and not another way. Last but least, I just wanted to thank all the panelists for a very interesting talk, very enthusiastic talk. And of course, thank you, Han, because you succeeded by leading this very difficult car with 6-7 horses who wanted to go very faster than you wanted. Thank you again. I would like to thank also all the people for listening and for the very interesting questions.
Thank you, and it's now time for everyone to eat lunch, especially the Chinese.